Breaking Bad is all about moral ambiguity, understanding the motivations of those who do wrong and witnessing the self-interest of those supposedly doing right. So with that in mind, how do you feel about Hank Schrader? Is he the good guy of the series, or just another selfish actor who happens to be on the lawful side of the drug war? I ask because, given the show is written from Walt's perspective, the viewer's relationship to Hank is complex. He's an antagonist, but also a cherished member of the family. And it's always understood that if anything were to ever happen to Hank, Walt would risk losing his family, who he had always claimed he was doing all of this for. But Hank is human. He's brash, flawed, arrogant, and even hypocritical at times. Yet, similar to Jesse, he also undergoes a high degree of suffering over the course of the show, both physically and psychologically, making him someone we root for and against at different stages of the story. But is Hank an honest, upstanding citizen worthy of the authority he holds, or just another bad guy who weaponizes the law for his own self-interest? Let's take a deeper look at the alleged morality of Hank Schrader to see if we can determine whether or not, on balance, he's a good person. The first key to assessing Hank's moral character is his relationship with drugs, and already people will be divided. Should individuals be free to choose what substances they put into their own bodies, or are some substances too addictive and dangerous that the state should intervene? Almost everyone has a different line here. Now, if all drugs were legalized tomorrow, Hank would be out of a job, but so would a lot of the violent cartel members he pursues. Many would argue that the war on drugs creates a playing field where only the most immoral characters can succeed, which puts drug users at an even higher risk, as whether or not a substance is legal doesn't change the market's persistent demand for it, something Hank clearly understands as he still finds a way to acquire his Cuban cigars.
Sometimes forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest, doesn't it?
Pretty hypocritical, right? However, Hank's main issue with drugs, if we're to believe what he teaches Walter Jr., is how they destroy the users' lives, so they need to be protected from themselves, and by making it more difficult to acquire certain destructive substances, he and the DEA are essentially disincentivizing self-harm. Otherwise, they might slip through the cracks and end up unhealthy, broken, miserable, not to mention committing more crimes against the public. If true, this would make Hank's intentions, whether the best method to serve the public or not, pretty honorable, as he is at least trying to help the community. However, if Hank actually cared about the welfare of drug addicts, surely he wouldn't talk about them so inhumanely.
Nasty, skeevy meth head. Every last one of these miserable wastes of skin got started how?
To make matters worse, Hank then invites Wendy over just so he can inspect her like an animal in the zoo, asking her to show her teeth and cracking jokes about her selling her body for drug money. None of this paints a picture of a man who cares about the well-being of drug users. And hypocritically, he also tells Junior that the world is a messed up place, and there was this one time he... Now, we don't get to hear the end of that sentence, but it was presumably marijuana. And Hank does little self-reflection of what circumstances might have led him to trying it out, and how others may have those problems on a more permanent basis. The truth is, everyone has different perspectives on the drug war, but most of us typically prioritize the more damaging and addictive substances over the milder ones. But Hank, despite his one-time experimenting, doesn't make that distinction, which is on full display when it's revealed that he arrested the school janitor Hugo for having a blunt in his car, and then jumped to the conclusion that he must have been the one to steal the chemistry equipment from Walt's lab. And when it turns out he didn't, he's still happy for him to lose his job and spend a couple of months in jail, not thinking through how negatively this will impact Hugo's life, subsequently leaving him with fewer options when he's released and continuing the cycle, all over a little bit of pot. So if Hank doesn't really care about the well-being of drug users, what got him into this line of work? Chasing the drug lords at the top. You see, Hank is highly competitive, he likes to win, and looking down on others is a joy that this job allows him to indulge in, which is why he likes to mock the criminals who end up losing their lives, even taking photos with their bodies. Because to Hank, once people have committed certain crimes, they're no longer human, comparing them to cockroaches.
cockroach comes out from under a fridge, what do? I mean, don't think about it. Stomp him down.
But then when Walt asks him what he thinks makes these criminals who they are, Hank has no insight whatsoever. He's not interested in understanding or humanizing them. He sees the world as a simple black and white dichotomy, as that's what his job has trained him to do. You're either a law-abiding citizen or a criminal, meaning you either deserve to be protected or taken out. And in many respects, civilized society needs to function this way. If there's a violent criminal on the loose, someone needs to stop them. And whether they're morally righteous or not, people like Hank are the ones that sign up. Competitive individuals with a clean-cut moral code that may be simplistic, but is perhaps necessary to get the job done. But despite mocking the death of criminals, even Hank has his limits, which he discovers in El Paso. As while he's sickened by what he's witnessed, the other officers have clearly graduated to the next level of dehumanization. I mean, they were all sitting in a room with this man mere hours ago, and now he's been brutally murdered, and they're laughing it up. So while Hank may not be a perfect cop, and we'll get into more of that later, behind the macho bravado that's been ingrained in him as a means of survival, there is something to be said for his willingness to repeatedly enter the line of fire, at great personal risk, to fulfill his sense of duty to his community, as he never commits real harm against law-abiding citizens. Which leads us into the second key to understanding Hank, his decency. Although there is much to criticize about how Hank talks, frequently making sexist and even racist jokes, there's no denying that if actions do speak louder than words, then his heart is in the right place. For example, when he learns that Walt has lung cancer, he lets him know that whatever happens, he'll always take care of his family. Which he appears to follow through with when Skylar asks him to take care of the kids for months while she's having mental health problems. On top of that, he also starts a donation fund at work for Walt's surgery, doing whatever it takes to look out for his brother-in-law's best interests. He's a solid uncle who visibly loves being around his niece and nephew, taking Junior out for lunch and generously offering to pay to baby-proof the pool because he believes money is tight. And when his nephew gets caught trying to illegally buy beer, he picks him up and brings him home. Now, despite this being hypocritical, as he is technically breaking the law involving a substance, he's taking care of those closest to him, and even tells Skylar not to punish him too much, as he's obviously just acting out because his father is sick. However, when it comes to being there emotionally, Hank doesn't have the empathy or understanding to pull it off. Which is no surprise. I mean, this is a man who believes his career would be over if he were to ever attend therapy. So if he's not curious enough to understand himself, then he's obviously not going to be emotionally equipped to help others. We see this time and time again. He always tells Walt he's there if he needs to talk, but when that time comes, he doesn't know how to handle it, and just tries to contain the crisis before abandoning ship. But when it comes to Walt, he's only really comfortable in their dynamic when he feels dominant, belittling and emasculating Walt as a means of elevating himself. But notice how when Walt knows a lot more about rocks than him, he can't stand being shown up. His ego can't take it. He sees Walt as this feeble, shy nerd while he's the jock, so he likes to flex his strength whenever possible, unaware of who he's truly dealing with. Which leads us into the final key, Hank's hypocrisy. As much as he views himself as Mr. Law and Order, he doesn't apply the law equally.
We have got to be understanding. We got to support the shit out of her.
When it comes to his wife's shoplifting, suddenly we have to be understanding and support her, a level of empathy he never applies to anyone he arrests. But even his own marriage is built on deceit, as Hank cheated on Marie the night before their wedding. And while he does feel torn up inside and debates not going through with it, he also tries to rationalize his behavior by questioning if oral even counts as cheating, and also can't stop complimenting how beautiful the person he cheated with was, which signals he feels very little regret except for the potential ramifications. Then when it comes to his job, Hank has singular focus. He just wants to catch his guy and barely cares about working within the confines of the law. For example, he tries to break into Jesse's RV before the lot owner has to remind him he needs a warrant. Or when he desperately wants Skylar to spill the beans, he tries to pressure her into a confession without speaking to a lawyer first, insisting this will be in her best interest. But if obeying the letter of the law is as important as he claims to others, why is he so willing to bend the rules for himself? If he can arbitrarily decide which laws he follows and which ones he doesn't, then why can't the other criminals he arrests? To Hank, it really comes down to they're bad people, so they have to be stopped. But what measurement is he using to determine their guilt that he's never done? He's purchased illegal substances, killed others in self-defense, like many criminals do, mistreated drug users, and locked up people who were committing very little harm. Just like any criminal, Hank always has his personal motivation for breaking the law. When he assaulted Jesse, it was a simple act of revenge. When he's feeling terrified of going back to El Paso, he intentionally goes to a dive bar, finds two guys who are holding, and starts a fight with them without ever revealing he's law enforcement, just so he can take the edge off by battering them around. So is this really so different from the likes of Tuco, who lashes out at others to make himself feel better? He's starting an unfair fight, as he has his partner outside and can flash his badge at any time, and then it's his word against theirs. All of this has to make you question how Hank would behave if he were on the other side of the drug war. Would he be as honourable as Mike, or as reluctant as Jesse? Or would he lash out in revenge, abuse those below him, and just want to win at all costs like the monsters he chases? But what sets Hank apart from the other criminals in the series is that he believes in the rule of law enough to step up and take responsibility for what he's done wrong. He could have lied about what happened with Jesse and tried to save his own skin, but instead he confessed and accepted the consequences of his actions. When he discovered Walt was Heisenberg, he could have just kept quiet to preserve his career, but instead he went out of his way to bring him to justice. And when he was held at gunpoint in the desert, he refuses to compromise his morals by cutting a deal or beg for his life, and instead chooses to go out on his shield. So when you put it all together, although Hank may not be a perfect man or a perfect cop, he's easily one of the most moral major players in Breaking Bad. As for the most part, he tries to look out for his fellow man as long as they do the same. He takes care of his family when they're in need. He feels bad when he does wrong and tries to make things right. And while he may have signed up for an unwinnable war, he's willing to not only fight for his beliefs, but die for them. So while there is much to criticize about Ace Hank Schrader, there's also plenty to admire. And the one thing you can never call him is a coward. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.